history of technology is the history of the invention of tools and techniques and is one of the categories of world history. The history of technology begins even before the beginning of our own species. Sharp flakes of stone used as knives and larger unshaped stones used as hammers. When humanity first used fire is still not definitively known, but, like the first tools, it was probably invented by an ancestor of Homo sapiens. During the Neolithic period, several key technologies arose together. Humans moved from getting their food by foraging to getting it through agriculture. The wheel was also likely invented at this time. The first irrigation systems arose roughly simultaneously in the civilizations of the Tigris-Euphrates River Valley in Mesopotamia and the Nile River Valley in Egypt. The first sailing ships were used on the Nile River. Since the Nile does not allow as much space for free sailing as the ocean, these ships also had oars for navigation. The oldest discovered seafaring hulled boat is the late Bronze Age Uluburun shipwreck off the coast of Turkey, dating back to 1300 BC. The Iron Age began around 1200 BC in the Mediterranean region and Near East with the collapse of several prominent Bronze Age civilizations, including the Mycenaean civilization in Greece and the Hittite Empire in Turkey. Alchemists in China invented gunpowder as a result of their search for life-extending elixirs. It was used to propel rockets attached to arrows. The knowledge of gunpowder spread to Europe in the 13th century. Nearly 5,000 years after the first sailing ships, the wind was first used to operate a mill. The first windmills were in Persia. They were horizontal windmills in which the blades were set on a vertical shaft. Later, European windmills were of the vertical type. The first definitive mention of a magnetic compass dates from a Chinese book finished in 1044. It describes how soldiers found their way by using a fish-shaped piece of magnetized iron floating in a bowl of water when the sky was too cloudy to see the stars. Watches evolved from portable spring-driven clocks, which first appeared in 15th century Europe. One account suggests that the word watch came from the Old English word woaki, which meant watchman, because town watchmen used the technology to keep track of their shifts at work. In 1698 Thomas Avery patented a pump with hand-operated valves to raise water from mines by suction produced by condensing steam. James Watt improved the Newcomen steam engine by adding a condenser that turned the steam back into liquid water. This condenser was separate from the cylinder that moved the piston, which meant that the engine was much more efficient. The steam engine became one of the most important inventions of the Industrial Revolution. Robert Fulton put the steam engine on water. His steamboat that was eventually called the Clermont took 32 hours to go up the Hudson River from New York City to Albany. Sailing ships took 4 days. In the early 1820s, Nice Fourniepes became interested in using a light-sensitive solution to make copies of lithographs onto glass, zinc, and finally a pewter plate. In 1826 or 1827, he made an 8-hour-long exposure of the courtyard of his house, the first known photograph. For thousands of years, harvesting crops was very labor-intensive. That changed with Cyrus McCormick's invention of the mechanical reaper. The earliest reaper had some mechanical problems, but later versions spread throughout the world. Samuel Morse was a successful painter who became interested in the possibility of an electric telegraph in the 1830s. He patented a prototype in 1837. In 1844 he sent the first message over the first long-distance telegraph line, which stretched between Washington, D.C., and Baltimore. The message, "What hath God wrought?" Once it was possible to send information through a wire in the form of dots and dashes, the next step was actual voice communication. Alexander Graham Bell made the first telephone call, on March 10, 1876, when he asked his assistant Tom Watson to come to him. "Mr. Watson, come here, I want to see you." German engineer Nikolaus Otto built an engine that, unlike the steam engine, used the burning of fuel inside the engine to move a piston. This type of engine would later be used to power automobiles. After thousands of trials, American inventor Thomas Edison got a carbon filament light bulb to burn for 13½ hours. Edison and others in his laboratory were also working on an electrical power distribution system to light homes and businesses, and in 1882 the Edison Electric Illuminating Company opened the first power plant. The definition of an automobile is a means of transportation that usually has wheels and an engine. A car is an example of an automobile. Carl Benz used a one-cylinder engine to power the first modern automobile, a three-wheeled car that he drove around a track. Guglielmo Marconi had been experimenting with radio since 1894 and was sending transmissions over longer and longer distances. In 1901 his reported transmission of the Morse code letter S across the Atlantic from Cornwall to Newfoundland excited the world. On December 17 Orville Wright made the first airplane flight, of 120 feet, near Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. He and his brother Wilbur made 4 flights that day. On the last, Wilbur flew 852 feet. Paul Cornu, a French bicycle maker, is credited with inventing the helicopter in 1907. His invention is the first helicopter as we know it today, and it managed to lift off the ground about 1 foot, for about 20 seconds. As a young boy in the late 1890s, Robert Goddard was inspired by H.G. Wells's The War of the Worlds and the possibilities of space travel. As a middle-aged man in the mid-1920s, he achieved the first test flight of a liquid-fueled rocket, from his aunt's farm in Auburn, Massachusetts. The rocket flew 12.5 meters, 41 feet, in the air. After the development of radio, the transmission of an image was the next logical step. Early television used a mechanical disc to scan an image. In 1922 the 16-year-old Farnsworth worked out a plan for such a system, but it wasn't until 1927 that he made the first electronic television transmission, a horizontal line. Iowa State mathematician and physicist John A. Tanisoff designed the first electronic digital computer. It would use binary numbers, base 2, in which all numbers are expressed with the digits 0 and 1, and its data would be stored in capacitors. In 1939 he and his student Clifford Berry began building the Tanisoff-Berry computer, ABC. As part of the Manhattan Project to build the first atomic bomb, it was necessary to understand nuclear reactions in detail. On December 2 underneath the football stands at the University of Chicago, a team of physicists led by Enrico Fermi used uranium to produce the first self-sustaining chain reaction. On December 23 Bell Labs engineers John Bardeen, Walter Brattain, and William Shockley gave the first public demonstration of the transistor, an electrical component that could control, amplify, and generate current. The transistor was much smaller and used less power than vacuum tubes and ushered in an era of cheap small electronic devices. The Soviet Union surprised the world on October 4, when it launched the first artificial satellite, Sputnik 1, a small 83.6 kilograms, 184.3 pound, metal sphere. The space race began between the Soviet Union and the United States, opening up a new front in the Cold War. In 1947, fruit flies were launched into space. Vinton Cerf and Robert Kahn produced the TCP/IP, Transmission Control Protocol/Internet Protocol, which describes how data can be broken down into smaller pieces called packets and how these packets can be transmitted to the right destination. Some examples include, web, a collection of billions of web pages that you can view with a web browser. Email, the most common method of sending and receiving messages online. Nanotechnology is science and engineering at the scale of atoms and molecules. It is the manipulation and use of materials and devices so tiny that nothing can be built any smaller. Stanford's John McCarthy, seminal figure of artificial intelligence, dies at 84. McCarthy created the term artificial intelligence and was a towering figure in computer science at Stanford most of his professional life. Sophia, world's first robot citizen or humanoid robot, is now getting all the attention. City of Joy, Kolkata, where she has arrived after touring 65 countries. Check our next video, the new era of technology and future of technology. If you have not subscribed the channel yet, please do it for enhanced your knowledge. Press on subscribe button and do not forget to like and share the video. Thank you.